Hi everyone, my name is Christy. Jacqueline and Sally are my two group mates. Today we will be presenting about classroom communication support for children with Autism Spectrum Disorder and ADHD. Before we begin, we would like to pay our respects to the First Nation people observing our presentation today and acknowledge their ongoing commitment to protect the land on which we live and learn. In today's presentation, we will explain what are autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. Then we will talk about how did these disorders impact children's communication and learning. At the end, we will list out some strategies that can help enhance children's learning experience at school.
So, about what are ASD and ADHD? To start with, ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, is a complex developmental disability. People with autism spectrum disorder may communicate, interact, behave, and learn in ways that are different from most other people. According to the WHO, about 1 in 100 children has autism. The abilities and needs of autistic people vary and can evolve over time. Evidence-based psychosocial interventions can improve communication and social skills with a positive impact on the well-being and quality of life of both autistic people and their caregivers. There are 3 types of autism spectrum disorder. We will start with the autistic disorder, sometimes called classic autism. People with autistic disorder usually have significant language delays, social and communication challenges, and unusual behaviors and interests. Many people with autistic disorder also have an intellectual disability. Another type is Asperger's syndrome. People with Asperger's syndrome usually have milder symptoms of autistic disorder. They might have social challenges and unusual behaviors and interests. However, they typically don't have problems with language and learning difficulties. And the last type is the pervasive developmental disorder. This is sometimes called the atypical autism or PDD-NOS. They meet some of the criteria for autistic disorder and Asperger's syndrome, but not all. May be diagnosed with atypical autism. These people usually have fewer and milder symptoms than those with autistic disorder. The symptoms may cause only social and communication challenges. And ADHD, as known as Attention Deficit or Hyperactive Disorder, is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorder of childhood. It is usually first diagnosed in childhood and often lasts into adulthood. Children with ADHD may have trouble paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors that they may act without thinking about what the results will be, or be overly active. Symptoms include daydreaming a lot, forgetting or losing things, squirming and fidgeting, talking too much, making careless mistakes, or taking unnecessary risks, etc. They may also have a hard time resisting temptation, have trouble turn-taking, and difficulty getting along with others. There are also 3 types of ADHD, which are predominantly inattentive presentation, predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, and combined presentation. Predominantly inattentive presentation refers to someone who experiences difficulty in organizing or finishing a task, paying attention to details or following instructions or conversations. While predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation refers to someone who fidgets and talks a lot, it is difficult for them to sit still for long. They feel restless and have trouble with impulsivity. Smaller children may run, jump, or climb constantly. Symptoms of the above 2 types will be equally presented in a person who is diagnosed with the combined presentation.
Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder, Communication and Learning. Children with autism spectrum disorder are often self-absorbed and seem to exist in a private world where they have limited ability to successfully communicate and interact with others. Yet, not all children on the spectrum exhibit the same signs of autism or experience these signs to the same degree. That's why autism is considered to be on a spectrum. This means that although children can share some common characteristics, Each of them is different and unique. There is a wide range of behaviors and experiences that are considered to fall under the umbrella of an autism diagnosis. Just like what Jacqueline has mentioned, there are three types of autism. Some children are diagnosed as high-functioning autism, as known as Asperger syndrome. They are known to have normal and above average intelligence with little or no delay in language learning or cognitive development. Some of them can be talented artists, and others can have above average memory or flourish in different areas like music and mathematics. Although every child with autism spectrum disorder can present very differently, researchers indicate that most of them have difficulty with verbal or nonverbal communication, which could impact their learning and socialize at school. The ability of children with autism spectrum disorder to communicate and use language depends on their intellectual and social development. While some of them might have minimal speaking skills, others might have rich vocabularies and be able to talk about specific subjects in great detail. Yet, in general, children with autism spectrum disorder are more likely to have difficulty developing language skills and understanding what others say to them. For example, they might have difficulty following class instructions. A research paper indicated that children with autism spectrum disorder tend to have smaller expressive vocabularies than typically developing children. Their lack of vocab can limit their ability to express themselves verbally. As a result, it not only hinders them from flourishing at academic tasks like writing and storytelling, but also impacts their socialization with peers. Also, many children with autism spectrum disorder frequently produce echolalic speech. Echolalia is a repetition of segments of speech that they have heard elsewhere. While some researchers suggested that children with autism spectrum disorder use echolalic speech as a way to communicate because they are unable to make up sentences for themselves, others advised their production might not be functional. Echolalic speech could just be self-soothing to calm them down. In terms of social communication disorder is nearly universal in individuals with both high and low functioning autism spectrum disorder. Children with autism spectrum disorder can take what it says literally and are not able to understand others' communicative intent when people are speaking non-literally. For example, when you tell a child you will be back with them in a minute, the child might expect you to be back in a minute and not realize what you mean is you will be with them after a while. Besides, they could have difficulty understanding body language and the meaning of different vocal tones. Taken together, these difficulties affect the ability of children with autism spectrum disorder to understand and interact with others, especially with similar age peers. In terms of their learning, children with autism spectrum disorder develop skills at different rates and in different order from typically developing children. For example, they could be very familiar with particular areas like naming colors and recognizing the train stations' names, but they might not always be able to generalize these strengths into different contexts. This means they might not be able to go from naming colors to answering questions about the colors in a picture, or from recognizing words to reading books. So that was an overview of how autism spectrum disorder can impact children's learning and communication. Now I will talk about some strategies for teachers to enhance children's learning at school. First, make sure you get the child's attention before talking to them. Trying to address the child directly by calling out his or her name is a good way to grab their attention. However, do not insist on them giving eye contact if they are not comfortable with it. Some children have an easier time concentrating when they're not making eye contact, and forcing them to do it might break their concentration. Second, simplify your language and be patient. Make sure your instructions are concise and to the point. For example, instead of saying, "Can you focus on your work and read this sentence?" you can point to the sentence and say, "Read this, please." Breaking down your instructions and giving them one by one can enhance the child's understanding. If you have asked them a question, make sure you have given them adequate time to process your question and structure their answers. Third, tell the child what you want him or her to do instead of what not to do. It is because children with autism spectrum disorder might have difficulty processing instructions. They might not understand what you would like them to do if you start your sentence with "don't." And fourth, use visual supports. Visual supports refers to using pictures or the visual items to communicate with the child. It could be drawings, symbols, photos, or written words. It makes verbal information more meaningful to children with autism spectrum disorder. Besides, some children with autism spectrum disorder have difficulty with organization and transitioning between tasks. It is really important to let them know what is happening and when. Using a visual timetable not only can enhance their understanding of what they are expected to do, but also reduce their anxiety and frustration. Fifth, break down a big goal into smaller tasks and provide adequate learning opportunities. Some children with autism spectrum disorder could experience learning difficulties. It is crucial to teach them explicitly and break down the task into achievable steps. Breaking down instructions into smaller tasks reduces anxiety and enhances their independence. It also helps children notice their successes along the way and builds confidence. Step up the learning goal gradually and provide them opportunities to practice while having a range of teaching strategies ready will be very helpful to enhance their learning experience in class. 6. Pay attention to body language and be flexible with your teaching. Children with autism spectrum disorder might not express their feelings verbally, but they may use facial expressions such as frowning or gestures to show how they feel. By paying attention to their body language, teachers can predict difficult situations that may lead to meltdowns and provide the necessary support that will help prevent them. And 7, provide modeling and encourage role play practice. Children with autism spectrum disorder often have difficulties requesting. Modeling and role playing are important for them to learn how to ask for help when they have a question or ask for things they want. For example, when a child wants something and tries to take it away from your hand without asking, you can model how to request nicely for the child and ask him or her to repeat after you. Gradually, the child will learn how to request appropriately for things they want. The last strategy is to allocate learning materials that suit the child's capability. Some children with high-functioning autism will show challenging behaviors in class if the learning material is too easy. These behaviors can also be seen when a child with learning difficulties has to complete tasks that are beyond their level. Therefore, it is vital to allocate materials that match the child's learning curve to prevent meltdowns or other challenging behaviors. Above is an overview of the impacts of autism spectrum disorder and some strategies to improve their learning. Now, Jacqueline will take over.
For strategies to enhance children with autism spectrum disorder's communication. Children with autism spectrum disorder will require the curriculum to be adapted in some way so that they can understand and achieve. Communication is the exchange of information, including ideas, needs, desires, and feelings. It can also be made in written form and includes reading and writing. Using a total communication approach can greatly enhance communication and understanding. This approach encompasses as many communication modalities as possible, for instance, signs, visuals, and speech, in order to give as many cues to the children. The augmentative and alternative communication, AAC, incorporates the individual's full communication abilities and may include any existing speech or vocalizations, gestures, mental signs, and aided communication. It provides a mean of effective communication to individuals with autism spectrum disorder, many of whom are unable to use conventional speech effectively. People with autism spectrum disorder stand to greatly benefit from AAC, particularly with current AAC technologies. Augmentative and alternative communication systems can be an effective way for children to learn and use early words. That's because children remember speech sound and the visual image of the object, picture, or hand sign that's paired with the word. This is likely to have autistic children who respond best to information that's presented visually. AAC systems can also improve children's understanding of words. This is because speech on its own can be very quick, whereas a visual image lasts longer and often stays still, giving children more time to understand the information. Also, people tend to slow down when they're using visual aids or hand signs. For example, they slow down to recall a specific hand sign, find the right picture, add emphasis, or ensure that the child has seen the whole message. This all gives children more time to understand the information and helps children avoid information overload. AAC systems pair tasks, actions, objects, or concepts with pictures and hand signs. For example, an apple is paired with the hand sign for an apple. The spoken word for the task, action, object, or concept is used at the same time as the picture or hand sign. Unaided augmentative and alternative communicative systems don't need any equipment. They use gestures and hand signs to support speech, or as the main way of communicating. For example, they might use keyword signs. AAC system can be both low-tech or high-tech. Low-tech systems use equipment like cards, boards, or books with photos or pictures that represent tasks, actions, or objects. Autistic children can learn to use these tools to understand what people are saying, ask for what they need, make comments, and answer other people's questions. Picture exchange communication systems, PECs, and visual timetables are examples. PACS is a tool that consists of 6 phases and begins by teaching an individual to give a single picture of a desired item or action to a communicative partner, who immediately honors the exchange as a request. The system goes on to teach discrimination of pictures and how to put them together in a sentence. While high-tech system includes speech-generating devices, there are also many apps to help children develop communication skills.
So how does ADHD affect children's overall communication? To begin with, ADHD is considered a cognitive disorder, specifically developmental difficulties with executive function. Executive functioning refers to the management system in the brain that facilitates the use of mental functions for managing multiple daily tasks. Executive function difficulties that children with ADHD may experience could be divided into 6 areas. The first, difficulty with activation, difficulty organizing and prioritizing tasks, excessive procrastination even with important tasks. Second, difficulty focusing, so they will be easily distracted by both surrounding things and their own thoughts. And third, difficulty in sustaining effort. They do well in short-term tasks, but the effort will drop over time and difficult to complete long tasks. And fourth, difficulty in regulating emotions. They will find it hard to manage frustration, anger, worry, disappointment, and many more. And fifth, difficulty with working memory. They cannot remember what they learned and a task that is put aside for another. And sixth, difficulty monitoring their action, impulsive in what they do or say, and jump to incorrect conclusions quickly, cannot notice others' reaction to the action, and cannot regulate speed of action to slow down or speed up. All the above mentioned difficulties contribute to both behavioral and social communication problems. Various researchers have investigated the relationship between ADHD and social communication deficits since the 1980s. And it was proven that there is a strong link between behavioral attention problems and social communication deficits. And how about other linguistic development, including phonological awareness, sentence structures, reading and spelling? We know that children's phonological awareness is essential for literacy development, and difficulties with phonological processing influence poor letter sound correspondence that are important for learning to read and spell. Surprisingly, these difficulties have a weak relation to attention or behavioral problems. And evidence proves that phonological processing difficulties are commonly observed in children with a developmental language disorder. And interestingly, children with symptoms of ADHD or pragmatic language difficulties tend to have intact phonological processing skills unless they have combined language deficits. And additionally, linguistic profiles often overlap in different disorders and difficulties are not specific to one. In short, the deficit in developing language and later literacy is different from executive function problems. Now let's dig deeper into pragmatic language deficits in children with ADHD. We could first look through a scientific approach. As Jacqueline mentioned before, there are three types of ADHD presentation. The two individual presentations will contribute by two neurological systems in the brain that works together for pragmatic communication. They are called cognitive-based function and affective process. The cognitive-based function helps with the maintenance of information on a topic and planning an appropriate speech in response. And the affective process helps with turn-taking and controlling excessive talking. A more precise definition for pragmatic language, PL, refers to an appropriate and effective use of verbal and nonverbal language in interpersonal contexts and is essential for children to interact and maintain relationships with people at home and at school. Examples are eye contact, turn-taking, initiating and maintaining conversations. Children with ADHD often have more difficulty with PL than typically developed children. Features mainly include excessive talking, including during times when they were asked to listen. This leads to poor turn-taking in conversations. Furthermore, difficulty planning and organizing fluent speech for a specific purpose. The ideas may lack coherence and are impulsive. Last, difficulty adopting appropriate listener and speaker roles, including a tendency to dominate a conversation and not respond to word prompts from conversational partners. Surprisingly, research showed that children with ADHD have intact knowledge of pragmatics, but problems with executive skills into social contexts. So how ADHD affects children's overall learning. Children with ADHD, no matter if they are below or above average intelligence, will experience more difficulty in learning than typically developing children. Literature proves that ADHD symptoms impact academic performance across the lifespan. While the extent of problems depends on severity of the symptoms, deficits in executive functioning appear to be the major reason for academic underachievements. Examples include inconsistent classwork and homework completion, poor quality work, and not following instruction in class. These children are also more likely to be placed in special academic services and classes due to the presentation of these difficulties. So what can we do to support these children? Children with ADHD learn differently from their peers. Research suggests that educators and professionals who work with children with ADHD should consider the difference in learning styles for these children and utilize different strategies to meet their learning styles and needs. The following conditions are recommended for observation when teaching children new information, which will help with planning management. First is the learning environment. Do they learn best in dim or bright lighting, noisy or quiet, warm or cool environment? Second, learning partners. Do they learn best individually or in groups? Third, duration of task. Do they learn best with short or long tasks? Fourth, knowledge delivery. Do they learn best with parental supervision or teacher's supervision? And last, the type of materials. Do they learn best with touchable and activities that require movements or lectures and reading? Interestingly, there are common learning styles and conditions that children with ADHD prefer more, and this preference contributes to the development of teaching strategies to support their learning. First, learn in a warm and quiet room because they are easily distracted. And second, learn in small groups to be motivated by others during tasks. Moreover, learning partners could also act as mentors when learning in a big group is challenging. And third, breaking down long tasks into multiple steps with specific guidelines for easy understanding. Shortening the duration of tasks and providing breaks in between could also allow for better sustaining of attention. And fourth, learn best when they know what and when to expect certain activities. For example, setting goals, using visual timetables, and providing rewards upon successful completion. And fifth, the teacher to pause and wait for a response. Be patient and allow more time for information processing. Last, add intangible and physical learning that allows students to get up and move around during activities and tasks.
About strategies to support ADHD students' communication. The first one will be trying to break sentences and instructions into 1 or 2 steps so they do not feel overwhelmed and support them to easily follow instructions by avoiding overloading their working memory system. Second, ask questions instead of making statements. This requires a child to stop and think about the alternatives, allowing them to self-reflect on their thoughts and actions and trying to make the most appropriate decisions. Third, reinforce turn-taking, to use visual scaffolds like cue cards or hand gestures to remind them to take turns in conversations, which is an important social communication skill to develop during childhood. Fourth, speak softly and whisper, to support them to accept and follow instructions. This is actually a little strategy to reduce their frustration and increase their willingness to listen to what you're saying. Fifth, the last one, instead of requiring a child to maintain eye contact, allowing them to move around or having something in their hands, like textured objects or fidgets, while you're speaking. This will actually increase their attention and retention.
In conclusion, we talked about the definition of ASD and ADHD, then the links between these two disorders and children's communication and learning. Lastly, we list strategies and discussed how educators, caregivers, and professionals could help and support these children. We hope you find this presentation helpful. Thank you for listening.